Hey folks, welcome to the very first episode of a 10 Mill Mastery Debrief of Service Drive Live. This week we're going to debrief on the conversation we just had about technician comebacks. So Marshall Sheldon and Josh Arnold are my guests. Today we're going to debrief comebacks, what was shared during the Service Drive Live episode, as well as things that may not have been shared, and go a little bit into detail. So please listen, watch, give lots of feedback. And this episode is sponsored by the Bearded Brotherhood, a new line of beard products for those of us that carry that facial hair to help keep that face nice and clean, that beard nice and shiny and fluffy. Check out the links below for your promo code to get 15% off and the link to the site to do so. So without further ado, please check out this episode and have yourself a great week. Fast and dirty is probably the way my grandfather would have said it. So, Marshall, what do you take away from this morning's SDL?
I mean, I wish we would have talked a little bit more about like what happens after you, like the car comes back, right? And it's identified that you messed it up as a technician. And then what happens next, right? Like, of course, you're going to fix it, right? And then you're going to send it back out. The customer's fixed and they're gone. But like, how is the tech taken care of after that? You know what I mean? Like, how are they compensated? If they're not compensated, how do the different managerial positions handle that situation, and how they, I guess it's kind of a case by case basis. So there's not really like a way to like blanket statement like, hey, this is how we do it. But I wish we'd have dug in a little bit more on the financial side of how that goes. That was like my initial thoughts just right off the bat. I was kind of hoping we might, but 1 hour is like just enough to get you fired up.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's just not quite enough to get exactly where you can feel it. I felt like we were right on the edge of it. If we'd had another 30 minutes, we'd have been in it. You know what I mean?
100% we would have.
Yeah. So that was my initial right off the rip. That was my thoughts.
So for me personally, in my experience on bench in mobile, in motorcycle, power sports, in automotive, even if there was inclination that it was a comeback, I can get paid for it. Pretty much across the board. And I'm pretty sure that Josh is probably in the same boat where even if there's any inclination in automotive, we're not getting paid anything. Unless there is a pure, unadulterated, dyed-in-the-wool that this is not your fault, this is 100% a new fault, or it was an pre-existing fault that we didn't know about, or whatever the case may be. You're not getting paid nothing. No diagnostic time, no time to make it right, nothing. Zero, not zilch, not. Now, and that was in automotive. In mobile, there almost wasn't any. And I think it was more because I was chief cook and bottle washer, much like you are, fixing heavy duty diesels. I was the whole process, right? We're making calls to accounts to find out what isn't broken, what needs service, whatever. You've got your log on all the equipment, your service numbers, You kind of know what's going to be happening with vehicles or whatever the case it is that you're fixing. You're there to fix it. You're talking to them. You're showing them because you're on site. They're there. They can see it. Hey, wheel is falling off because there's no tread left. Like, there is no rubber left on the steel thing on the backside of this forklift. I don't need to diagnose it, like, you can see it. Versus things that don't necessarily work off. Your intermittent concerns don't really happen on big stuff. Big stuff is, it's broke or it's working. There's not a whole lot of intermittent stuff on big equipment. So, and power sports is a lot more like cars. There's not really intermittent stuff. I think it's more because it's super simple in like the heavy duty stuff. I'm not super intimate on the big heavy stuff like you are, Marshall, but it's somewhere in the middle. It's not really intermittent. So the comebacks really didn't exist on power sports in my experience. So it's really focused on automotive where comebacks, but that's, I think, because they're so complex. I could be wrong in that. But again, talking about pay, nothing. Zero, zilch, nada.
And that's kind of the way that's kind of the way I assumed, because like from my perspective, like I get paid no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for me, I was just trying to understand, what that looks like from a flat rate perspective. Because fortunately, when I did work flat rate and heavy duty, I didn't really have any comebacks that I can recollect. So I always got paid on my flag time. So, and if there was any question, that company, you could do training online at home, and they paid you flag hour for the training. So if the training took 0.8, you got paid 0.8.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I always did, 10 hours a week on top of whatever I flagged that week. So I would just always I
You
always
always
had a
have
little,
extra.
yeah, I always had a little fluff. So if I did have a comeback, I never really noticed it in my paycheck, you know.
Hmm.
So, but that was something I was really trying to like see how people handle the, you know, that's what I really wanted to hear people say was like, hey, when we got a comeback, this is what happens.
Okay.
And because I was, you know, I just want to see how they handle it. That's why like I jumped in was like, hey, you know, it hurts when you get a comeback. You know, that's just like when you're a manager and you come out there and you've got your big stick and you're ready to beat that technician for their comeback. It's like I'm not a technician that you beat because that one lick might be enough for me to walk out the door and go right down the street to the competition.
Josh, on your side, again, there's a little bits in there. You were nodding your head when you were saying you're not getting anything.
Yeah.
What? So there's a couple of pieces there that Marshall, because he's hourly, but he's been doing it for 15 years. Your
Yep.
flat rate, and you've been doing it. I think we were talking about this on your episode, which this went out. No, that anyway, doesn't matter. We were talking about that. You're 8 years in, I think, total.
Yeah. Yeah. 8 years.
8 years in,
Um,
so there's the disparity between the three of us. So folks that are listening and or watching, Josh has got 8 years in just automotive. Marshall's got 17 years in, I think the number is now 17 or 18.
Yeah, it's like 18-ish. Yeah.
18 in, and like 98% of it's heavy duty mobile. And I'm going to be rolling like 24 this year. And I've worked automotive, I've worked heavy duty equipment, I've worked power sports on the bench. So between us, there is a lot of experience and a lot of diversity. So take that into account when you're listening, when you're talking about comebacks, because we all have a little bit different stories, a little bit different perspectives. I really want you guys to take that in, learn from it, and take it back to your shop. It's like, okay, maybe this is something that we can do in the shop or deal with in the shop or whatever. So Josh, in your perspective, from your experience, no pay, correct?
it's guilty until proven innocent in automotive for sure. I was also going to say off of the SDL, because you did the first take thing. I think a lot of it is always interesting too, because in SDL, I can't tell where people are currently at and what the field that they're doing. A lot of those guys were speaking previous experience as technicians that had moved into management or some form of management. And I think in SDL that a lot of the guys that are there obviously are the ones that have progressed. But as with the automotive industry, the guys that are actually doing the job are rarely the ones that are speaking up. And there's a couple people in there that did, and Marshall's one of those, of course. But I think that when you ask for technician feedback, you'll get a lot of people that were a technician and then moved into something else and then speak for the whole. And I always think that's it's a hard thing for me to listen to because your perspective is fleeting. Once you step into that role, you're going to have a whole different perspective on things. So as far as automotive goes, yeah, it's hard to get paid for comebacks, and the discussion, should you get paid, is, I guess, depends on the type of mistake that was made. If it's negligence on the technician side, then probably shouldn't get paid. If it's a mistake from other people in the group, because unlike with Marshall there, it's a game of telephone between me and the customer. Video MPIs, talking to the customer, always alleviates this. But again, flat rate is, I'm only making money if I'm in my bay. So it does take a lot of personal financial sacrifice to ensure that a vehicle is fixed 100% correctly sometimes. And I think that's what miss in the SDL is that they don't pay for those extra steps. Saying it's always on the technician, that's okay, but I don't get paid for going to speak to the customer. There's no compensation for that. That is the advisor's role. So if I'm fed misinformation, I have to go out of my way to correct that. And I do, but it does take my paycheck. And constantly what will happen is this industry is the guys that are the highest producers are the ones that don't do that. So, I mean, it's a flat rate problem. It's an industry problem, but just saying that, technician's job is to do other people's job because we're the ones that are looking at the vehicle, I don't feel is fair to the automotive, because a lot of us are flat rate. If they want to pay us differently, I'm happy to go spend as much time as possible in front of the customer. Prefer it because it eliminates the game of telephone. And I guarantee we would have way less comebacks if it was just me talking to the customer most of the time.
Agreed. This is where having the conversation about pay plans with regards to comebacks comes into play. Because in order to cover all the bases, to do your due diligence, to be a good communicator, to educate your fellow technician, to your baymates, to educate the parts people, to educate the service advisors, to educate the customers, all takes time that isn't you fixing a car, right? Functionally speaking, it means that you're not fixing a car. if you're not fixing a car, you're not making money. I'm going to say it a couple of times here. So when you get to management, and like SDL, many of the leaders in SDL were 5%ers. We're looking to grow. We're looking to learn. We're looking to get better. They are looking at ways to grow. But what they forget and can forget, some of them may have, some of them may haven't. The things that take the most time are the most beneficial, but we're not making money when we're doing them. Right? That communication, that education that we're doing for the customer, for the advisor, so on and so forth, we're not getting paid for. Well, it's part of the job. Only if you're paying something outside of the actual flat rate of fixing a car, right? If you're not paying on team productivity in some capacity, and I'm sure there's a way to build a mix in there in some capacity where the fixed first visit, the comebacks, team productivity, and things like that all balance out in a nice pool for the entire team. That way the entire team is compensated to make sure that they're training the teams around them. Maybe that's a thing. Again, I go back to, I want to make pay plans as simple as possible, because if it's not simple, nobody wants them, and it's super hard to explain, because the last thing you want to do is take 30 minutes to try and figure out how to claim your pay plan, as it were, at the end of the week. But yeah, so comebacks. So what I wanted to ask you both about what your individual process is. Let's forget about what we talked in SDL to a certain aspect, because we didn't actually really dive into this. Somebody shared a comeback process, but do you agree with their individual processes of what occurs on a comeback process? Marshall?
Well, I was trying to think back at, there was just a lot going on. So I was trying to think back at one of the processes that was shared. I might defer to Josh while I think about it if I can.
The one that really stood out to me was Wayne, and I think that's what the industry misses the most, at least especially on automotive side, is that he's the one that can fill the gaps between flat rate and comebacks. Because Wayne is obviously not paid on flat rate. I mean, he made that specific, but also he's the one that does the teaching and learning and can take that time to quality control. But a lot of modern dealerships, they don't want to pay for that role because it's a non-production role. That role tied in with flat rate can work very well. I liked his pitch. I think that's exactly what this industry needs, but I would say making it to where it can make sense on paper for the managers above it is really the hard push for this industry, because if you're not a production role in the dealership, you're costing them quote unquote money. And it's hard to put the value on a guy like Wayne, right? Like, he fixed one comeback that week. Well, did that save us $1 million customer? Did that save us, from having to do 3 other repairs that wasted that technician's time? There's a lot of value that goes into it, but good luck quantifying it on a piece of paper.
It's hard. It's 100% hard to try and quantify that on paper, right? The challenge there you've got, it's a couple deep. Right? If a technician isn't spending enough time to QC a car after repair, that's problem one. Okay, that's problem one. Forget about all of the that could happen. Poor communication between customer and service advisor, poor service advisor write-up, poor parts processes, poor dispatching process. Forget about all of the pre-technician stuff. Like Richard said, some of the accountability has to fall on the technician. So the technician has done what they've thought is the best that they can do for that repair, but they haven't QC'd it. And now it's a comeback. Well, if it's a comeback and that same technician now has to fix it, now they're doing something that isn't going to generate revenue, not only for the business, but for themselves. So the business is losing money because they're not doing a new repair to make money on, they're doing something back. So now your productivity has gone backwards. So you could, in theory, quantify over a month, 2 months, over a year, if your technicians as a whole in 2024, say, let's say they had 100 comebacks over the course of the year, and you look at all the work orders with a comeback on it and the amount of time spent. Okay, well, if I had a full-time, non-productive foreman who did all of the QC, and that reduced my comebacks by 75%, and in 2024, my comeback hours by technician spent was, let's say it's 200 hours for some grins and giggles. That's 150 hours. That's probably not enough to quantify specifically to quantify a non-productive foreman. But let's say that was 175 work orders. So that's 175 customers. 150 customers. That's 150 customers that you haven't pissed off. That's 150 hours that you're now not behind, you're now up, because that 150 hours now got done something else by a technician. So you're making money on top of that. And you haven't pissed off 150 more customers. You've pissed off 150 less. So you're now up even more. So your experience is higher, your fixed first visit is higher. So I think a good leader could quantify your fixed first visit, your comebacks, your productivity if you document the work orders properly. But in order to document the work orders properly, you need a non-productive foreman doing all the proper QC on both the vehicles that are going out regularly and the comebacks. Document, 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 document. That's what we talk about all the time. Marshall, have you had enough? Have you figured out exactly you want to go down?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm with Josh. Wayne was really the only one that really kind of dropped a process that he's doing that, that their group is doing. Just to piggyback off you just a second, a guy like Wayne is doing a similar job to what I'm doing, except for I'm also billing time, but he's doing the same thing. And except for he's teaching classes, I'm not physically teaching any classes.
Well, you're
but
teaching apprentices though. That's you're
I
one.
yeah, I do my
got three
mentorship
right now,
but
right?
What's that?
You got 3 apprentices right now.
I have 2 3-year techs and 1 1-year tech right now. The 1 year is progressing nicely, and so I'm taking on another apprentice. And so if you're in Georgia area, holler at your boy. But I'm trying to take on an apprentice first quarter this year, and I've got to take on one fourth quarter. So yeah, it's going to be a busy year because we're busy. But yeah, so I think if you're a guy like in my position, or you're a guy in like a Wayne's position, and you're out there, and that is your role, you're QCing after all these technicians, yada yada. You really you need to create yourself a portfolio. You need to document all of the saves.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because we find things and correct things before they become a problem. I'm going behind junior technicians. Hey, you can't do that. That's going to mess this up. You've got to do it this way. It's before it even gets to the QC process. We're dodging bullets before they even come. And I know Wayne's doing the same thing. If he's walking the shop, he's saying, that's not right. You can't jack that up there. You're going to bend that.
Mm-hmm.
We're solving problems before they become problems, on top of QCing those units and correcting that stuff before it leaves the shop. And then on top of that, since you're if you're in a non-productive role, you may be the guy to go look at that, determine if it's a comeback. I would think if a car comes back and it's a possible comeback, you're paying for that guy whether or not they're fixing anything or not. If it was me, I'd have that non-productive guy say, hey, is this a comeback or not? You've got 900 years of experience, Wayne. Can you run over and check that truck? Car it just came back. Let me know if it's something we did. If it's something the technician did, what we need to do to go forward. Boom, he's over there and he's like, yeah, technician left the ABS sensor hanging out of the whatever, So I feel like that's a possibility that he may be doing some things like that as well. But that's the process, My guys are fixing trucks and, well, all kinds of equipment really, and I'm QCing the work. Or my 3 years QC each other.
Mm-hmm.
They've progressed in their careers enough that they'll do some brakes on a F-250, drive it around, burnish their brakes, come back, and then the other tech will jump in it quick and do a test drive as well and say, hey, yeah, it's good. Or, hey, why didn't you say anything when you wiggle the steering wheel back and forth? The shocks is blowed out in the back. This thing, you can't hardly steer this thing.
Mm-hmm.
We need to let the customer know about that. That's something you missed. And they call each other out on it, and that's the way it's got to be. And I think another solution is if you don't have a non-working foreman or a non-productive foreman, and you don't have a guy like Wayne or me that's there QCing everything, if you've got a senior tech next to a junior tech in the bays, they should be QCing each other. There's no reason why bay mates can't QC each other. I know all the things that we talk about, like Josh said, those things don't pay, but they do pay if the car doesn't come back. So from a technician perspective,
that's one of those things that again, we talk about things that pay directly versus pay indirectly. Not having a car back in itself is like payment, right?
Yeah.
You've done the job properly. The customer is
100%.
happy. The customer's paid the bill, all right? Or the customer pays the bill. It doesn't matter whether it's warranty or not, because the customer's paying the bill. Warranty just means that the manufacturer's paying the bill. At the end of the day, that's somebody paying the bill, right? But let's move to the last little piece that I want to talk about, which is the pre, right? The pre-comeback. This is preventative. AJ dropped this nice little nugget. This is not going to be as helpful from your perspective, Marshall. I still think it's going to be helpful because you do all of the things when you're out mobile. I do want your perspective, but because you're out and mobile, you do the write-up technically yourself, right? You're writing your own. Conversely, Josh Arnold is at a store where he has advisors, right? So AJ dropped this write-up thing that I've got up on the screen. I'm going to see. I'll make sure to put a link to it. I don't know whether AJ has it on his profile. AJ, if you don't, I'm going to make sure that AJ puts it on his profile so you can go check out AJ Holst. He is an amazing trainer for advisors. He's really focused on express, but also on advisors and how they communicate with the customer, especially their walk-up, their meet and greet, their walk-arounds, the things of that nature to help prevent comebacks. They're really good at upsells. Wiper blades is AJ's favorite thing to talk about, so make sure you talk about wiper blades with AJ. But this is I'm going to read this off, okay? So y'all just listen, watch, whatever. I'll put it, whatever. When you get more information, ask quality questions and then listen. That should be the most important thing that every service advisor listening, every technician listening should understand. Ask quality questions and then listen. So there's a big difference between selling work to a customer and then identifying their needs. So this is where comebacks can happen. If service advisors or mobile technicians who are actively selling, because we've got lots of mobile technicians in automotive now, especially in the vans, especially the big push by Ford, you can create comebacks before anything happens by assuming and selling versus listening to their needs. That's a big, gigantic problem. I had it as an advisor too. I had this big problem as an advisor. I'd be jumping in because I'm fresh off the bench. I knew what was wrong. Shut up and listen. I said this on Limitless Leadership podcast recently. Shut up and listen. One of the most important parts of leadership. Same thing about advisors. So when you're asking quality questions, make sure to ask open-ended questions. Why? How? When? Where? What? And encourage questions and encourage answers that aren't resulting in a yes or no answer. Closed-ended questions, just you get nowhere, right? And lastly, he explains, tell me what's going on. Open-ended question. How often does XYZ happen? Open-ended question. What does XYZ feel like? Open-ended question. What does XYZ sound like? Right? Can you explain the exact circumstances why XYZ is happening or when it's happening or what is happening? Right? Josh, is this something that you guys are doing in the store? Like, do you have a write-up process that goes into detail for the advisors?
I don't think so at my place. I work at a shop across the street from our main shop, so we have communication between advisors even more difficult than normal, but there isn't a process specifically for advisors. As far as writing up, it's basically each advisor is going to tailor how they handle a customer differently. So it makes it hard on the tech side because some advisors are extremely detailed, some are not. But as a technician, you kind of learn to work with what you're presented. At the end of the day, automotive is so much, I don't have a lot of control over parts. I don't have a lot of control over advisors, and it makes it hard sometimes. But I think it requires you to have that drive to deliver a good quality to the customer. Otherwise, you will fall short in those systems.
Fair. And it makes it really difficult when, again, we were talking about 10 minutes ago, that if you're having to do all of the legwork because of inadequate questions, inadequate responses, you're not getting paid for that time. So not only you're not producing, means it's not going on your paycheck, but you're getting behind the curve on production, more likely for communication issues, more likely for a comeback. So having a process up front is going to help prevent comebacks. Okay. Marshall, because you're out in the field and you're doing most of this write-up on your own, do you have a written process? I don't know whether MHC does, whether you do. Do you have a written process for your own write-ups?
So I don't have something written, and I should probably do that because, I'm training, these 3 years they're about to break out, they're pretty much on their own now. Mm-hmm. And they're really going to be completely independent without me making their own choices. So I should probably put something together. I know, like, I've done some classes with Eric and things like that to just try to hone those skill sets. Big shout out to
Eric Outigi, Easy Care, Corey Smith, Jerry Weldon. Big shout out to those boys at Easy Care doing service advisor training. I appreciate, Marshall and I have both done it. Josh Arnold, if you can get an opportunity to sit on one of their virtual classes that they do, I think they do them bi-monthly or something like that. It's
been a long while since I've got in on one, but I need to, because it keeps you sharp. Helpful. Yeah, it keeps you sharp. Like, just a, shout out to Eric, because, like, I was asking him about business cards, right? So we have business cards. We hand our business cards out to our customers. And I was asking him about, like, a tent style business card that's like a thank you for your business, and it's got my company information on it, and it's got me on it.
Mhm.
Because, you know, and you and I talk a lot about personal brand and things
Mhm.
like that. And, you know, we have in our mobile, the way, you know, we got customers that call our shop and they ask for us in particular. I want this technician. And it's kind of like a barber, I think, because I go to the same barber every time if I can, or I go to the same tattoo artist every time if I can. You find a good tattoo artist, that's the one you want, right? And I feel like technicians should be, you know, pretty much in the same boat. But yeah, I don't have like a good process that I'm just doing.
So maybe that's something that we can work on together. 1, 2, I know one of the easy things that can be done, you can dictate. And for anybody listening or watching, Google Documents, if you go on Google, whether it's mobile or on a desktop, Google Documents does talk to text. So you can literally speak into your phone. You can do it on your Notes app, or you can do it on Google Docs. There's several other documents. Just talk, right? When you're writing up a customer, just talk, and it'll record what you're saying. You can then piece that out, throw that into ChatGPT and say, hey, this is what I just talked about. These are everything that I said. I need an SOP on how I just did this write up. And it's going to spit out a bunch of stuff. You can do it a quick edit. But now, instead of having to type all that stuff out, instead of having to edit all that stuff, you've talked through your process. You've said what you've said. You've thrown it in, created something. Now you have something to base your process on, and then you edit as you go. Every day you're doing it 5, 10, 15, 25 times a day. Service advisors, technicians who are doing write-ups, whatever, to help prevent comebacks. Now you have a written process, and you can do this for anything. You can do this for absolutely anything. Talk to text, get a document, throw it in ChatGPT, even the free one, and get it to spit out a summary so you can start your SOPs. Get it written. Get it written. I think we're going to keep it nice and short and tidy right there, talking about comebacks. So this is super off the cuff, trying to figure it out. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. Remember, negative pushes, positive pulls, and always clean your toys before you put them away.